How's it going, everyone? I'm Des with DesFit, and this is Ray from dcrainmaker.com, and welcome to the 4th annual Sportswatch Year in Review. And we have the most watches that we have ever had on our year in review.
This was a big year. This was a lot of watches.
We were so busy.
It's been a crazy year. I'm glad there's no more watches, I hope, at the end of the year. To film it again.
So funny, funny story. This is actually the second time we're filming this. We tried to film this about a month ago when Ray was visiting me out in Colorado. Yep. And there were a couple last minute surprises that basically, we threw that entire video out the window. But that was a good one too, but this one's gonna be even better.
They can't even see how many watches we have. To them, it ends right here. Mm-hmm. There's still another half a dozen watches to this side.
Yeah, I mean, he's going to need a bigger table next year.
Bigger table, yeah.
So yeah, just like every year, this is more of kind of like a general overview of all the major sports watch as well as smartwatch releases that were released. And we have full in-depth reviews of all of these watches, either on Ray's website, YouTube channel, or my YouTube channel. So I'll have all those videos and articles linked down in the description below. But this is kind of just like a overview of each of these models, about like what we like, about what we didn't like. And it's going to be a long video, as you can probably see from the duration there. But this is kind of like more of just like a podcast chat sort of thing. So I'll have chapter descriptions of all these watches in the description below, but this is kind of a video that you can kind of just put in the background and just kind of listen to, because it's just kind of like a chat about two dudes and a whole lot of watches.
Way more watches.
Yeah, exactly. So in terms of like trends this year, I think we saw a lot of dual band satellite system technology come out. Yep. I think we saw a lot of smartwatches that got a lot better battery life, or I guess more the smartwatch focused watches get a lot better battery life, and wrist-based running power. Anything else that?
Yeah, I think it's just a lot of refreshes. Some of them are major and some of them are minor. I think we've seen like an increase of buttons in some areas. So focus like from Apple with the Apple Watch Ultra having extra button, and even some other companies that have added Garmin with the Venu 2 Plus down there adding a button. I think that might be the trend as well going into next year. We're kind of moving away from the whole like touchscreen is everything.
Yeah, I guess so. Let's go ahead and start out with the first release of the year. That was the Garmin Venu 2 Plus. And what the Plus is that it has a microphone and speaker. However, it also has a third button that Ray was just talking about. And that enabled it to basically, you can enable a assistant from your phone, a Siri or Google Assistant. But the microphone and speaker also allowed you to make calls.
Yeah. And we were actually reasonably impressed with the speaker quality, microphone quality of this on the watch itself. It's not too bad. I think it's one thing we tried it. I don't know where we were together.
We were in one of the Spanish islands, I think.
Yeah, and trying it out, and it was like, oh, this is actually totally acceptable. But it's interesting to me because this is almost Garmin layering bricks, right? And so we'll talk about, this was, in a way, this is the first kind of unit, if you will, of them brick layering this year. But the very last unit of the year layers things in a different way. And if you compare like a Garmin watch to what people call like a true smartwatch, something like a Apple Watch that's LTE enabled, has all these things, right? LTE and also the ability for speakers and microphone and music playback and streaming music and all that. And Garmin has always kind of been a little bit behind on those smart things, but of course, way ahead when it comes to the sports side. This is them checking off the box and saying, we can do speaker, microphone, and the waterproofing that comes with that. At the same time, though, it lacks the LTE, right? And so then you get to the end of the year and you go, oh, this thing over here has the LTE, but doesn't have it's a really like, they're just checking these boxes slowly, but they haven't pulled everything into one product yet that you go, finally, that's the product you want.
The speaker was absolutely really, it was completely surprising because you can actually play music off of it too, which is amazing. Now, there's a little trick though with the Venu 2 Plus, is that with any non-Apple Watch, you can't reply to a text. With the Venu 2 Plus, you actually can via Siri, via that voice assistant. So it's a little bit, I don't want to say a dirty trick, but it's a great little trick that this watch has, is that this is one of the only watches that's not an Apple Watch where you actually can reply to a text in a way.
Yeah. I'm still not really into talking to my wrist though in general.
No.
I just haven't got down that rabbit hole.
Basically, with the size, they split the difference between the Venu 2 and the Venu 2S on this one. So this is kind of like a mid-range option. It also has like a stainless steel back. But yeah, this is an interesting little option. But as Ray mentioned, it definitely is kind of like laying little bricks, and like there's little pieces that are you'll see on all these different watches, at least Garmin watches this year, that I don't know. I think it's going to tell a story for the future.
Yeah, I think so too.
Yeah. Talking about telling a story for the future, we have the Vivomove Sport. So this is Garmin's hybrid smartwatch. So basically this one has a analog hands on it, but it also has a little LCD. And sorry for the little flickering there. This is just the frame rate, not necessarily getting the...
These watches are so hard to take pictures of.
They really are. Yeah.
Video pictures are complex, but video is a whole different ballgame.
Oh gosh,
you can find just the right the right exposure settings for the picture, but the video is like, oh yeah. These are cool watches though. And this is again another layering of a brick for Garmin, what we'd see later in the year with the Instinct crossover series for things where having a analog style watch is nothing new. Withing's been doing it for many, many years, for example, and now Garmin's been doing it for a few years as well within that kind of Vivomove series, and it's been the classic before that, and there's been a bunch of variants of it. But this was sort of the first one they kind of pulled together the sports side in a real kind of way, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Like in a meaningful way. I don't think it's a watch that really appeals to like you and I to wear as our daily driver watch. But my wife wore it for like a month and a half or so or something, and she really liked it. So
it's an extremely attractive watch. I mean, it just looks like a traditional timepiece sort of thing. And for those of you who aren't familiar with what a hybrid smartwatch is supposed to be, so basically it has the analog hands, has the LCD display below it, but what happens is that when you interact with the watch hands actually move away. So you can actually interact with it. It's like a full-on touchscreen. But yeah, it's a nice looking watch, but considering the release that comes out a little bit later in the year that we'll talk about, it's going to be interesting to see where they go with this hybrid smartwatch idea.
Yeah, I think they're onto something. Again, it's a long journey, if you will.
It is, yeah, absolutely. So next up, we have two different releases. We have the Fenix 7 and the Epix Gen 2. So the Fenix 7, this was a long time coming. I think over 2 years that we were waiting for this one.
Yeah.
So with the Fenix 7, they brought out dual band satellite system technology. There's a touchscreen, but the nice thing about the touchscreen is that you can still do everything on the watch with the physical buttons still. So that's really where touchscreens are great in certain situations, but buttons for a sports watch, that's really what's going to be important.
They really nailed that concept, and it's something that I think a lot of people are really hesitant on touchscreens on sport watches because of the fact that so often it's either or there's things you can't do. But everything on this watch can be done via buttons if you want to. You can straight up disable touchscreen across the board. You can pick it on a per sport profile basis. You can say, you know what, I want it when I'm running but not hiking, or whatever combination you want. And that's been something that they executed super well here. And I think again we'll talk about this a lot later on, but the concept later on. But in this case, like we look at the Apple Watch Ultra in some of those areas where you really want to have buttons for certain things and you can't access them. This was executed well.
Yeah.
And then the sibling to this was the Epix, of course. And so this is the AMOLED display, so super bright, vibrant display, less battery life, of course, with this. But it's essentially just a Fenix 7, but in an AMOLED version. And this is something that I think preferred the Epix overall, just because I felt like the display is so nice on this. And once you go to this display, it's really hard to go back to that display.
Yeah. The going back to the touchscreen really fast too is that we were in the same Spanish island that we were checking out the Venu 2 Plus. Is that the touchscreen, using it with the maps is a wonderful experience. Using maps were really nice on the Fenix 6 and the Fenix 5 Plus before it, but honestly, using the buttons with the maps, it was hard. It was just, you had to use all these different button combinations to actually get around the maps. They were great as quick little references, but in terms of panning, zooming, it was kind of a pain. But the touchscreen experience really, really helped that out quite a bit. So
and I think credit to COROS the summer prior for doing some of the map touch-based stuff there with the Vertex 2 at the time, and then other watches later on. And of course, there's been other watches that have had maps over the years with touchscreen, even the Suunto 7 Wear OS watch and others. But having it on the Garmin side from a Garmin perspective was a huge step up in just the ease of use of that, and the maps are far more detailed in general on the Garmin devices than they are on other devices.
They came out with quite a few models, not as many models as the Fenix 6. I'm talking like
24.
Well, like versus like 30 something. Probably. Yeah.
So ridiculous, by the way.
Yeah.
But
Still ridiculous, but but they tried to consolidate the lineup. It was a little bit less confusing, is what I'd say. The nice thing is that they did come out with 3 different Fenix 7 sizes, and one of my favorite features of the Fenix 7 range was the Fenix 7X that had the built-in LED flashlight. So when they first told me about the flashlight, I was like, come on, a flashlight? And then got it, used it, became the reason that I wore a Fenix 7X for a while, just because I used the heck out of that thing.
It's definitely, the first reaction is just like that for everyone, myself included. I was like, really, a flash? No, come on. And you still see comments like on YouTube videos and everything else that people say the same thing. Flashlight, that seems stupid. Once you use it, it's like, oh, this makes so much sense. And there's different brightness levels, so it's not always like blow up the whole room flashlight. There's even a red light in there too, so you can have like a much dimmer, much more subtle red light that you can use. And just, it's super useful, not even just like outdoors, which it is useful for, but also just like general day-to-day scenarios, like getting around the house in the middle of the night where you don't want to have don't take a phone with you, whatever the case. Like it's logical. I love to see in other units, like for example, the flashlight's not offered on the Epix because the Epix is that middle size. So as Des just mentioned, on the Fenix, they have the 3 sizes, but on the Epix, they only went with 1 size. And so it'll be interesting to see next year, will we get like an Epix size variant? Like obviously Garmin has experience now with the AMOLED displays at many sizes, even down to kids watches. That's technically not AMOLED, but same concept. And so will we see this in like an Epix Gen 3 technically, but a next version of this, or will they just have a new size of this one?
And to be clear too, with the flashlight, yes, pretty much all these watches do have a flashlight feature in terms of like turning the display in its basically to its highest brightness level. But in terms of the 7X, it actually has a dedicated flashlight that's LED flashlight that's built into the top of the case here.
Right, whereas these ones here, you can double tap most upper left-hand buttons on Garmin's and get into the flashlight setting and adjust it accordingly. That's a super quick, like handy way to use a flashlight without having a flashlight.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, that's the Fenix 7 and Epix. Next up, we have the Suunto 5 Peak. I did not review this one. This is one of the few I did not review this year, but yeah, talk us through this one, Ray.
Yeah, so this unit here is essentially taking the Suunto 9 Peak's design style and bring it into their mid-range multi-sport watch. So the Suunto 5 Peak's a great little watch if you're getting into triathlon or just sports in general, and you don't want to spend all the money of a fancier watch from like a Fenix, but even a Suunto lineup like a Suunto 9. This hovers around $300 typically, and I like the design. It feels super lightweight. They did switch over to the Sony's chipset, or they use the Sony chipset, but not multi-band. So we actually don't see any multi-band units from Sony or from Suunto at all at this point, unfortunately. But still, the GPS was okay on this. The heart rate's the same as they've kept in the past, also okay. But just having most of the features of the Suunto 9 Peak in this, including a lot longer battery life. So looking up to 100 hours of battery life for GPS battery life, it's a solid little watch. Like again, if you want to get multi-sport and don't need all the features of some of the other things, this is a great option there.
Awesome. Cool. So that's Suunto 5 right there. Next up, we have the Garmin Instinct 2, Instinct 2S, and Instinct 2 Solar. And by the way, this is going to be a little bit of a lot of a heavy Garmin lineup this year, but Garmin just chose to come out with a lot of devices this year.
Yeah, I don't even know how many, I guess we could count them, how many Garmin devices. I can make Des put it on the screen right there on the, it's for you to count them up and put it in editing. But it's something that I think we've talked about in the past where we just review what gets released, right? At the end of the day, Apple here, they made, 3 watches this year, right? And so we have 3 watches to review. Garmin made, excluding all the color variants and things like that, they made like, 20 watches, right? And so 20 watches to review, COROS made 2, etc. And so you're kind of along for the ride with what companies review and when they review it. So the fact that we started off, the first 4 watches were Garmin was just the year. By the way, this is in order of release for the year. I don't know if you said it earlier on.
No, I didn't. Yeah, exactly.
So from January until December over here, and just chug on through that way.
Totally. Yeah, so we have the Instinct 2, Instinct 2 Solar, and the Instinct 2S, as well as the Instinct 2S Solar. And by the way, there's actually plenty of other different versions of these two. There's like a tactical version, a surf version, a diesel, for truck drivers. I mean, it's kind of crazy. So the cool thing about the Instinct 2 and the Instinct 2 Solar this year is that basically they brought a lot of the features that people wanted out of like a true sports watch into the Instinct series. So the original Instinct, it was, it brought the design, I guess you could say, more than anything else. Very unique design, that, retro Casio look to it. But it didn't bring a lot of the training and performance features that you'd find on their Forerunner lineup or their Fenix lineup. And people were really wanting that. And I'm not even sure if Garmin themselves kind of anticipated how popular the original Instinct would get.
No, I don't think they had any clue.
Yeah.
I think it was a Hail Mary and they landed and it's been
like bonkers.
Success.
Yeah, exactly. So that's really probably what the biggest thing for me about the Instinct 2 series was, is that it brought multi-sport support, it brought open water swimming, it brought the training performance feedback like VO2 max and recovery and all that kind of good stuff.
Sensor support, so power meters and trainers, and I mean just tons and tons of things.
Yeah.
It made it a full-featured, not just multi-sport watch, but in a lot of ways, the Instinct has always been referred to as kind of like the mini Fenix, and that was true to an extent when it came to like going out for a hike, but it didn't have maps and stuff like that. But now this is almost like a mid-range Forerunner, which is somewhat funny because what we see over the course of the years when Garmin releases their newer Forerunner 255 that we'll get to, these features are designed to be lockstep for the most part when it comes to a lot of the core features. There's still some minor differences that we see, but as you said, just really bringing these watches into their kind of like full potential. And then over the course of the rest of 2022, they've added in features like HRV status and other things that were high-end watch features, if you will, from a Garmin standpoint. And so it's really fascinating. Even the surfing features were added into these base models in the most recent firmware update, which is nice. It's one of those things where I think people just got a little bit frustrated with that and saying like, why do I need to buy the Surf Edition to get just a firmware unlock for this particular thing?
No, I think Garmin has definitely, listened to a lot of the feedback they've had over the last couple of years, that there's just been a lot of differentiation, like very, very minute differentiation too between watches in terms of features. But we have seen, especially just literally in the last like couple weeks, a lot of firmware updates that are making the feature sets very similar across the board, where you're essentially just going to be choosing between different types of hardware versus software features.
And that's good. It's what people want. People, I think, are really tired of having to deal with like, this watch over here I like the looks of, but I want the features of this one over here. And they've gone to this whole quarter release cycle now where it's like they've got these quarterly release cycles that all the groups release the features at the same time on the same, or not same watches, on different watches, same features. And is it perfect? Absolutely not, right? It's still, it's not necessarily like a super smooth landing, but it's at least the plane all landing at the same time and all passengers seem like they're on board. Whereas in the past, it was like people skydiving and it was just a big mess. And so I think they're getting there. Good progress.
Yep. So next up, we have yet another Garmin product. So we have the Garmin Descent G1.
Yeah. It's a little confusing because I've got the Marq II for their higher end watch.
Right,
and
exactly. Yeah. So, and you just went diving with this like yesterday. Yeah. So tell us about this guy.
So yeah, this is essentially a Instinct 2 Solar. So it's hard to, there we go. Perfect. Instinct 2 Solar under the covers, but it's got diving features. In fact, you can probably even see just beyond the 24-hour marker. So yeah, so 27 hours since my surface interval. There we go. 27 hours since my surface interval yesterday. I did a dive, only like 40 minutes or whatever, so not too long, but it was somewhat deeper, about 30 meters or so. So a little bit deeper than a typical shallower dive. And this will track all of that on the watch itself. So as I went down, it would show me my exact depth, of course, and the dive profile, and I can look at all my decomp settings. Everything's all in here, and then as I get back to the surface, it does a safety stop, it times that safety stop, and then ultimately it will sync into the app, and I can see my entire dive profile, including, for example, if it was a drift dive, where I went into the water and then where I came out of the water. Super cool stuff. No air integration though. So if you're comparing it to their higher end, Marq II, for example, that does have air integration, but for that, once you're done paying for the air integration module and the watch, you're talking like $2,000 versus this is like 600-ish or so. This is interesting because, again, later in the year, we'll see not just Apple, but Suunto add diving features or, you know, underwater features, about a better way to frame it, underwater features into the watches. And I think those will pressure Garmin to basically take this functionality here that they put into the Descent and put it probably into like their Fenix 8-ish series watches. That's what I would expect, and which is a good thing. I think it's cool to have that be more accessible. And, you know, certainly $600 for what is essentially an Instinct 2 with an additional, you know, port for additional sensor for measuring depth gauge is a bit pricey, but it does a good job of that for folks that want essentially an Instinct 2, but just occasionally dive. That's the best way of putting it.
Sure. Yeah. And next up we have the Polar Pacer and Polar Pacer Pro. So they brought the Pacer back. And with the Polar Pacer and Polar Pacer Pro, basically they brought a lot of the features from their higher end multi-sport watches down to a considerably lower price range. And these are very good values for what they offer. With the Pacer Pro, this one has the barometric altimeter. So this will collect the wrist-based running power. The regular Pacer will not. But yeah, these were just, in my opinion, like just good values.
They were good values, yeah. I think especially the Pacer, the base one. I think the Pacer Pro is a bit more challenging at the price point because now it's competing against like the 255 and again the COROS Pace 2 being cheaper than that. But good starting points, and you know, having a lot of those higher end features offered in that both of those watches is pretty cool. And again, like the original Pacer naming is from like 1990 something or 80 something. It's way old. I even found on eBay one of the watches. I was gonna buy it, but I'm like, no, there's no reason to buy a watch just for like 7 seconds on a video.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's cool to see them come back with that. And I think that resonates better as a name than even like the Vantage series. I don't know where the Vantage series naming will go from here, if they'll keep it. But effectively this watch killed off like the Polar Vantage M series. There's absolutely no reason to buy that watch whatsoever.
Yeah. No, I mean, yeah, that's the thing is that this Pacer Pro, it's kind of like a little Vantage Mini, I guess you could say, in a way. But I think that, I don't know, the Vantage series is probably more about the premium materials at this point, because feature-wise, this provides nearly everything that you would need.
Yep. I think we are seeing also Polar, we saw it started last year, we talked about this, where that they've got their Grit X series, which has the fancier materials, the fancier stuff. I think ultimately their goal would be to probably, they're not going to try to make a Fenix equivalency in terms of features. That's just not viable. But in terms of that materials, having their Grit X be material choice if you want that, and then the Vantage series being the if you don't necessarily worry as much about the style material side of it, but the same features. And that's what they kind of aimed at for last year. And so I wonder if they can kind of do the same thing here as well with some of those materials going on.
Cool. So yeah, that's the Polar Pacer and the Polar Pacer Pro. Next up we have another Garmin, and this is the Garmin Tactix 7. They have the Tactix 7, the Tactix 7 Pro, as well as the Tactix 7 Pro Ballistics Edition. So with the Tactix 7 series, this is essentially a Fenix 7X with special tactical features. They have a special bezel on the outside here. And then the other kind of highlight hardware feature is that instead of a let's see if I can get this to go actually. So instead of a red light that we see on the Fenix 7X, you actually have a green light. And this is supposed to be really good for, I believe, night vision goggles or night vision goggle compatibility. So this one's just another kind of more specialty edition of the Fenix and Epix models. We're actually going to see a few of those as well, like the Quatix 7, the D2 Mach 1, I think there was one more too. I can't remember.
Or even Enduro to some degree, right?
So. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So, but this one, let's see if I can get that flashlight off. But yeah, this one, honestly, I think it's just going to hit a particular crowd that kind of wants something that, first of all, those tactical features, but second of all, it actually looks pretty darn cool too.
Yeah. It's a nice looking watch.
Yeah. So, yeah, and it also comes with a special tactical nylon band as well as the silicone band inside the box. So, yeah, that's the Tactix 7. Cool little watch. Next up, this is not the Vivosmart 5,
we couldn't find that.
Yeah, we couldn't find it. So this is the Vivosmart 4.
The small watches just like escape. They run for it.
Just like just like that. So the Vivosmart 5. So this one was just like honestly kind of a minor update for the
I thought you
year.
were going to say something else. I thought you were going to say it was honestly kind of a miss.
Well, yeah, it was, there wasn't a whole lot new about it. The price is probably the most challenging portion of it, considering it didn't have a color display, still uses connected GPS. Yeah, it was just like when we're gonna see another similar fitness band type tracker later on in the year that offers a lot more for a lot less. Yeah. It was a little bit rough.
I would say this was Garmin's first miss of the year. Like if we're going, from start to beginning, this was in March, April, I guess.
Let's see here. Yeah, April.
Somewhere in that time frame. And to me, this was, they just said shrug and put it out there. Having no color display after Fitbit, 9 months prior, last year sometime, put out the Charge 5 with a brilliant color display with built-in GPS and obviously built-in heart rate too. And while the GPS and heart rate were both a bit of a dumpster fire on the Charge 5, at least there was an option there, which is better than having no GPS at all here. And so, yeah, it just didn't seem like it was so weird. It was just one of those like, oh, we got some, we'll just scratch off the 4 and put 5 and call it done.
Yeah, that was, I think they should have done something different on that one. Yeah, it just wasn't compelling enough, and especially I think looking at some of the competition that we're going to see later this year. Yeah, so yeah. And then next up, sorry, again, a couple more Garmin. So this time they went with the 255 and the 955. So this is, again, in an effort, I think, to consolidate the lineup a bit. So with the 255, this came with full-on multi-sport support and a lot of the features basically that we found in the 745 as well as 645. So at this point, 745 and 645, those series, there's really no reason for those at this point.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, and that's what the thing is that, the 255, it's honestly very impressive for what they put in here in terms of features. Yeah.
It's basically a 745 plus all these new features that it got as well. Or if you want to phrase it differently, it's also essentially an Instinct 2, right? Like in terms of those features, except the one key difference is that multi-band GPS, which is something the Instinct 2 series didn't get. And that feels like the Instinct 2 is kind of the cutting line there, where I think Garmin was, wanting to roll it out and test it out on their Fenix 7 series devices first, as the first major watch to have that. And then by the time we reach the end of the year, either that chipset or the full multi-band becomes kind of the standard for where they were. So a bit of a transition for their chipset. And it's always tough because, from a company standpoint, eventually you have these lines in the sand, right? Where these were June and those were January. But of course, that's just when you hear about it when they're announced. These devices are being worked on for many, many months in advance, a year up in some cases. So that's where that dividing line was. And having both of these being multi-band and this being a $300 watch at multi-band is pretty cool. But it's also tough for people who bought a Fenix 7 series device, still buying a Fenix 7 series device that cost $700-800, right? Without multi-band.
Yeah.
That's a tough thing.
Yeah, but still, even without the multi-band, the GPS accuracy on the non-dual band versions of all their Garmin watches this year is very impressive.
They've got magic sauce in there. Even like, again, New York City testing I've done with that, between multi-band and non-multi-band on that chipset, that's really important. The chipset and the antenna design they have on the Fenix 7, and there are other watches that don't have it either, like Instinct Crossover being one that I think you went out today into the city and did some testing with, and they're doing really impressive stuff there to the point where, as I said in like my COROS Epix 2 video, I don't care whether or not something is multi-band. I care whether or not something is accurate. So if you have multi-band and you get accurate tracks, great. If you don't have multi-band and you get accurate tracks, great. If you have multi-band and get crappy tracks, that's the problem, right? I don't care how you get to the end goal. Just get there.
Yep, totally. And then in that lineup, we also have the 955 and 955 Solar. So that brought solar charging capabilities to the 955 series. This one did get multi-band as well. But I think probably the highlight feature in my mind with the 955 is the training readiness.
Definitely.
And HRV status, because that's something that a lot of people have been looking at devices like Whoop for before in the past, and they're bringing that to a watch that doesn't require a subscription, first of all, too. But kind of consolidating a lot of different metrics into the training readiness score. So we have the HRV status, but then you actually get your training status, your recovery time, all that kind of stuff into your training readiness score, which is, in my mind, I think probably just as easy to understand as Whoop's strain and recovery, but I think it takes in more factors.
Correct. Yeah, I think Whoop's strain recovery is like 98% is not how much you sleep last night, your HRV value during your sleep last night, and that's cross-referenced against what it thinks you should have slept last night based on your strain the day before, but that's a very small amount of it. And so those numbers are very easy to fool, and you get wildly different numbers all the time. I would say, yeah, training readiness, what Garmin's done here, pulling in lots of things. Again, nothing is perfect, but it's by far the best implementation we've seen from any company out there. And I think in the middle ground is something like Fitbit with their daily readiness, which is, again, one step above Whoop, and it has these 3 to 4 core factors that influence that. It's cross-referenced and tapered against your historical norms, a lot better than Whoop is, which really isn't cross-referenced at all against your historical norms. And then here, this has that with more tapering. So you don't generally get these big swings unless something is wrong. And it's also separating out your workout performance or workout kind of recovery and training versus your life recovery and training. So how well do you sleep, how much activity you're doing, your stress, and it's starting to pull those together. There's still things they can improve upon, but I think on the whole, like they're finding that right balance between all those things.
Thing is, like, all of these devices for the most part, can collect your HRV, or, a lot of them. And I think a lot of what Whoop has done, to their credit, is create easy to understand metrics for a lot of folks. But I think it's basically the opportunity for a lot of the other companies to be able to just collect that data and just present it in a really easy to understand way, kind of like training readiness. And and you hopefully won't have to pay for a subscription.
Well, in this case, they also, like, HRV is a good example, where your raw HRV value, if you just look at it each morning and just look at that value by itself, isn't super useful, because HRV is something you want to trend over longer periods of time, 7 days and plus minimum, right? And so that's where Whoop is giving that HRV value in a very easy to understand manner, but not in the most actionably accurate manner, versus what Fitbit is doing and what Garmin is doing. I think we'll see others as well, start to kind of, like, again, taper that against longer term trending, so you can actually make sense of those things.
Yeah, totally. And along with training readiness, I came out with a kind of interesting feature called Morning Report. Again, one of these features where when I first heard about it, I'm like, neat, but it's actually really is kind of nice. When you wake up, you get this like special screen that kind of gives you this little welcome message, and then it shows you like what your recommended workout for the day is, your sleep score, your training readiness, all this kind of stuff, presented right to you. And it's kind of the first thing I would do anyways in the morning, was like, I would check, I want to see my sleep score, how ready I am for my next workout, and it kind of just gives you all this stuff kind of just presented to you in this kind of like a little folder, I guess you could say.
It's super well executed. Again, another example where Garmin was not the first, right? So we saw Apple have that, and even Suunto had variants of that in the past. I'm sure others have had it as well, and those were good. But Garmin took those things and was like, we can make this better. And the fact that you can customize it, you can add those data bits, and it's just nice to see. I also like that it doesn't go away. Like, I can, look at it, see it's there, and go, oh, okay, right. I'll go deal with the kid that's screaming right now about something upset in the morning, and come back to it like an hour later, and it's still there waiting for me until I dismiss it. Versus a lot of the other watches will get rid of the morning report as soon as you take like 7 steps away from the bed. And it's like, I didn't even get to see it yet. So good stuff.
Pretty neat implementation. So, and then next up we have the Enduro 2. So yet another variant to the Fenix series, basically. So with the Enduro 2, with the Enduro 1, I guess I'll back up a little bit. With the Enduro 1, that came out, had the most insane battery life out there. It was so good. However, they had to pull a ton of features to get that battery life. With the Enduro 2, well, they didn't skimp at all. I mean, this was, I actually said it in my video, I believe, but this is kind of like a Fenix 7X Ultra, because it's aimed at that ultra endurance crowd, because it has some of the craziest battery life out there. And then they went with a brighter flashlight as well, and it comes with a nylon band instead of the silicone band. But this is personally one of my favorite watches of the year, actually. This is the one, it's not wet, by the way, this time, from a shower.
Oh, that's nice. Last time we filmed, you had worked out or something.
I'll put the clip right now. Did you want to pick this up? Because I just took a shower, and
it's It's moist.
It's
It was not good.
Yeah. So, but yeah, Enduro 2, I think it really hit a lot of marks because there were no compromises with this device, right?
Yeah, and you pay for it. I mean, it's an expensive watch in comparison, but if you need that battery life, it's there. And again, having the little bit improved flashlight, just again, Garmin going back over the course of their 9 months of experience at that point, saying, oh, we can tweak things and remove. They just changed like the filler up there a little bit, and that just got a lot brighter. And so it's good.
Yeah, the thing with the Enduro 2 though is that with every new model, even if it's a variant, that's what Garmin is trying to do now. Is that they're coming out with new software features, even though this is it is different hardware, but it's just like slightly different hardware. They're coming out with new features with kind of each variant too. So with the Enduro 2, they had Sat IQ, which is basically automatically switching between dual band and single frequency satellite modes to basically save on battery life. There was also the Nextworks feature and I believe, grade adjusted pace as well.
Right, yeah.
And again, we literally just recently in the last month or two saw a lot of those features come back to a lot of other devices. So again, it's like they're just going to introduce a new software feature that I think we're learning that they're probably going to port those features to other devices.
Yeah. But that's a good example where Garmin can improve on their whole quarter release cycle, right? The idea that right now what happens is they announce the Enduro 2, and at that moment everyone's like, oh, what about the new features? Are we going to get them? And everyone scrambles, and there's a lot of clarity. Versus, it'd be nice if the day they announce those new features, the day they announce this watch with those new features, those features concurrently shipped out to all the other watches that they plan to. Like that would be the holy grail. In the same way that happens with Apple, right? Like when these watches go live, when these watches are announced, they have new features on them, but all the rest of the watches get those new features 1 week later as part of the planned release cycle. So it doesn't be the exact same day, but like that would be the holy grail of moving from the quarter release cycle to how do we pull it all together into something that feels cohesive to the consumer, so there's not just a bunch of confusion. And I think that ultimately makes happier consumers, right? People it's super easy to understand at that point.
Yeah, totally. So yeah, that's the Enduro 2. Next up, we have the Galaxy Watch 5 and Galaxy Watch 5 Pro. And with the Galaxy Watch 5, honestly, this was not that much different than the year before. However, they did increase the battery to a very respectable, 50 hours of standby, which honestly, it was really, really nice to see, considering that, last year it was very much like the smartwatchy type battery life, I guess you could say, basically about a day.
Yep.
So yeah, increasing it to 50 hours was substantial.
Yeah, I think they learned a lot. A year ago they had just joined or got on Wear OS, and then now a year later they've obviously learned a lot from that experience on how to optimize for Wear OS, and I think we're seeing good things there. We're seeing them finally, it's no longer necessarily a joke about Wear OS battery life like it used to be in the past. Now it's in the same ballpark as Apple's is for the most part.
Yeah, totally. Things. Again, just like last year, I think these are gorgeous watches. I think they just do such a great job with their industrial design on these things, like just absolutely stunning. And so that's the Watch 5 regular, and then this is the Watch 5 Pro right here. And again, personally, this is probably one of my favorite looking watches of the year. I think it's actually really stunning.
I think I like I have the black one somewhere here, but I have the black one. You have the grayish, that we call this one.
I can't remember what this one's called.
This looks so much nicer than the black one.
It's pretty awesome.
It's really nice looking. Again, the flickering you see on the screen there isn't what we see in real life. That's just, camera stuff there. But the gray is nice. It is a beefcake though. Like the first time or 50 that you put it on your wrist, you're like, holy mother of cowbell. It is thick. And it's mostly, and I have an entire video about this silliness, but it's mostly because this back section here is just really, it's like the front of a cargo ship. You know that bulb in the front that like the water?
Oh yeah, totally.
That's every time I think about this, I think about the front of a cargo ship. That just giant ball up there. It's just, compared to like, I'm just going to pick a random watch here. It's a much smaller back on these versus this is like the whole thing.
Yeah, the Watch 5 Pro, this one had 80 hours of standby battery life, which was awesome for sure.
A bit optimistic though.
Exactly. A bit optimistic, but it was still much better than before. They also brought interesting navigation features, like something that I was not expecting Samsung to come out with, and I'm not sure if this audience is wanting a feature like that, but they came out with it. You can import GPX files into it and do some basic breadcrumb navigation.
Yeah, and admittedly better than Apple's navigation features
Yeah.
for native navigation. Now, once you get beyond the core Apple apps, then I think Apple's third-party apps like Work Outdoors, stuff like that, are much deeper.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was interesting to see that. You know, I play with it a little bit, and it's a starting point. Again, this is where we're seeing some of these non-endurance focused watch companies, again, Apple, Samsung, etc., starting to get into how to become endurance sports watch companies. And that's a really, really long road. That's not a road that you can do in 1 year, 2 years, even 3 years. It's a long road of understanding. And sometimes it's a geeky road, like the ability to support GPX file import isn't like simple and sexy. It's a complex thing with lots of variance in it for the average consumer anyways.
Yeah, there's still some fundamentals that I think Samsung really needs to just, I don't know, like they said that there this was a new heart rate sensor on here. It looks virtually the same, and honestly it performed virtually the same for me, which is underwhelming basically. Yeah, and GPS acquisition, again, still something that is just really rough with Samsung devices. There's another device later in the year I'll talk about too that that's not a Samsung device that has the same issue for me. But yeah, I just really want Samsung to just take a step back and just look at those like core GPS and heart rate functionality and dial those in.
Samsung needs to send all of their engineers to like Nome, Alaska in January and then make them go for a run. Make them stand outside and wait for GPS to acquire. And that'll last 1 day and that code will get fixed.
Yeah.
Because it's been like this for years on every single Samsung watch, and that it doesn't, for whatever reason, their pre-cache isn't doing their thing right or something. We've had like the first time we met many years ago, we were both had Samsung watches and we're both standing there waiting for like 5 to 10 minutes.
Oh my gosh, you reminded me about that. That's right.
Yeah.
And that's happened like 5 times now since.
For 5 generations of watches. Exactly. Like, this isn't hard. Every other watch on this table manages to find GPS within a reasonable amount of time, like under 30 seconds. And you're out there forever with this. Like, it's just...
Yeah, I just, that's like, just fix that. I would be so much happier. Yeah, I would be so much happier. I mean, you make gorgeous watches, like just fix that. Yeah. So next we have the Venu SQ. Did I get that right?
No, it's got to be Venu Square because then the 2 goes after it.
Yeah, oh gosh, dang it, you're right. Yeah.
One of these times we'll get it right.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, the Venu SQ2. What this did was it updated the original Venu SQ, which had an LCD display with an AMOLED display like on the other Venu series. So great looking watch. They increased the size of the display. They also increased the battery life. They have the new GPS chipset. That's the all systems, or basically 5 different satellite systems on it. And just like the Instinct series as well, it's a 255, even without dual band. I was thoroughly impressed with this thing, like in terms of accuracy. Like it was a solid performer for me.
Yeah, this is it's a fine little watch. I don't know what to say about it. There is no Venu 2 Plus features on it. That's kind of the one quirky bit, right? There is no microphone and speaker on there. It just keeps to its little lane, if you will.
Yeah, totally. But yeah, I would certainly call it a good upgrade.
Yeah.
Yeah, totally. Next up, we have the Fitbit Inspire 3. And again, I was very impressed with this device this year. So this one has a color touchscreen on it. It provides a lot of features for $100.
Yeah, especially like right now on the sales and stuff like that, being down to $69.
Yeah, and what's crazy about this like watch is that, we talked about HRV before. Like this watch can collect your HRV. So if you're looking actually for something that just kind of lightweight that you can wear to sleep, that is really non-intrusive, that can collect your HRV values, this is actually a good option, right?
They nailed this. It was, I mean, at $99, it was already an amazing deal. This realistically could have been like $129 or something, even $150 as Garmin attempted to do. And yeah, it's super good. The accuracy was good. Yeah, whatever engineers worked on this need to work on the thing we'll talk about later on, because this was just nailed across the board. Yeah, super solid device.
Well, I don't know. We could actually just follow up right now with what
right
exactly right next to it. So I tested the Sense out for a week or 2. No, yeah, it was like over 2 weeks. I could not get GPS acquisition for 2 weeks. I finally did, but it was an incredibly frustrating experience for me.
Yeah, mine's the same. I've tested it for probably a month. I still haven't written a review on it, which I need to. The review would just be titled dumpster fire. Like, not even dumpster fire, like landfill fire, whatever that is. and it's so bad. The Sense 2, I don't even know where to begin on how bad that is. By far the worst watch of the year.
Yeah.
And arguably the worst Fitbit watch ever.
I mean, I've had, the heart rate accuracy was like not good on it. GPS acquisition was like terrible for me. And they
once you got GPS, bad.
Yeah, exactly. And then they actually even removed features
Yep.
that were on the original Sense.
That's, I think, probably the biggest disappointment. I mean, yes, it's inaccurate and slow and all these other things, but why would you remove all these features that were there in the Sense 1? Like, and I know the like working conspiracy theory is to then put them in a Pixel, but having talked to a lot of people, I don't think that's the case actually. I just think they were trying to like minimize code in there and stuff like that, and it's bad. Like removing all these features, all these smart features, makes no sense because again, the Pixel Watch only works on Google phones. So if you have an iPhone, which is undoubtedly the majority of their customers, for Fitbit's customers anyways, is an iPhone, right? So I know that, I think we've talked about this in the past, where if you look at all phones worldwide, Android obviously leads there. But if you look at the target demographic and market for these watches here, iPhones tends to lead about 2/3 to 1/3. And so for a Fitbit in particular, you're selling to iPhone users, and to have like all those features be ripped out for no particular purpose and to have, I just don't get it. And it wasn't just me and you saying this. Almost every single review across the board of the Sense 2 has been like,
yeah, and I'll point something out really quick too, and this is a funny little thing because it's really funny that your device is doing this as well. So I had this charged to 40%.
I would say, how do you get to 0% all of a sudden?
Well, and here's the thing, it'll say 0% for a while. And so this is the exact same thing happened to mine where I charge it to about, 40 or 50%. It would turn off and I'd turn it back on. It would just say 0% there. So anyways, Sense 2 Versa 4, I would probably stay away from this.
Far away.
Yeah, far away. All right. Next up, we have the trio of Apple Watch releases this year. So first we have the Apple Watch SE 2, the second version of it. Basically this one, essentially they updated it with the high G accelerometer for the car crash detection. And then they changed the construction of it where it's aluminum now on the back versus the glass, which is supposed to be a lot more eco-friendly. And other than that, it's actually largely the same watch. But the big story, I think, of this year was more Watch OS 9 and what features that brought out to not only the SE2, but a lot of previous generation Apple Watches all the way back to the Series 4. And the feature sets were a little bit different depending on which Apple Watch you got. But at the same time, it was really impressive for Apple to be bringing a lot of features like the new workout data views, or basically like new data pages. They also brought wrist-based running power, triathlon support, a lot of features to a lot of older devices.
Yeah, it was a huge upgrade. I think if you looked at the Apple Watch across the board, Watch OS 9 was their first like shot across the bow. I know it's used a lot, but it was clearly a shot across the bow at Garmin especially, but also Polar and Suunto and COROS and what they can do. I mean, the fact that they came out and said, you know what, we're going to add running power. Like running power, of all the things you would add, running power. And they did, something that was super niche. And boom, overnight, it's on umpteen tens of millions of wrists, because it went back 5 generations almost basically of watches. And so that's something, it's impressive. The amount of sports features, as you just mentioned, they put in there. For $250, this is an astounding watch. And yeah, I think I've been, wearing it a lot over the last few months, and it's a really solid option.
You done with your review yet?
It depends. That's a proper race. Who will be faster to edit? You to edit this entire gigantic video, or me to drag 4 photos into this review and take 1 4-second bit of B-roll and put it in there?
Yeah, there's sometimes these watches that we have on our wrist for like, it's not like it's a bad watch or anything like that, but just for some reason or another, they just like live on our wrist for longer than others, I guess you could say. So
this review has been done for basically months, and I keep having to like update it because I've been wearing it so long. I was like, oh, I'll add this little bit in here and this little bit in there, but it's like just needs to get knocked out the door.
Yeah. And then next up we have the Series 8, which again largely is very much the same as the Series 7. It added the high G accelerometer, but it also has the wrist temperature sensor that's going to be used for retrospective
ovulation cycle data.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's not quite the forward-looking data that you would see with Whoop or with Aura, but it's going to basically pull that data and kind of make guesstimates on your past history. So it's a starting point. I would suspect in 2023 we'll see Apple join Whoop and Aura and that kind of looking forward.
Collect more data basically.
Yeah. But otherwise, the exact same sports features as what you see on the SE though, in terms of all those new bits there. We were talking about this today. This is from my favorites album, right? This is actually from my hike. This is like some peach cobbler thing on my 8-day trek in Mont Blanc. But it's cool is that, again, so one of the things we were talking about is anything that's been a favorited photo gets pulled into the watch faces if you have it set as your photos for the watch faces. And it's super cool because every time I raise my wrist, I get a new photo. So if I just put it down, it's off. Come on, go off. It's not really ideal being, there we go. You get a new photo and it's just amazing. It's something that is so good on Apple's watches. And I know it sounds trivial. It's like, oh, you have a photo album, but it's not just a photo album. It's like always synced, always there. If I favorite something on my phone, don't think about it. It shows up in my album the next time I watch face. It's always like a little smile, if you will, of things.
Yeah, I guess I'll just fill in on a tangent a little bit. We were just really talking about how there's just a lot of really subtle but really nice touches that Apple does on across all its devices. People talk about the Apple tax, and I think it's very much true that you may pay a little bit higher price for an Apple product, but there's a lot of subtle little things in the background that make just kind of a difference, I guess you could say.
Yeah, it's fun just to sit there and tap photos and see what comes next.
All right, next up we have one of the biggest releases of the year, the Apple Watch Ultra. Basically, quite an anticipated release. I mean, people knew something was going to come out, but not necessarily this. And honestly, even us, both of us were at the Apple event sitting in the Steve Jobs Theater, and when that came on the screen, it was, I didn't really know what to think, I guess you could say, at first.
I thought, damn, that's a thick watch. But it's so the main hardware difference. Well, a lot of main hardware. Obviously, if you compare this side by side with the Series 8, you can see it's got essentially button guards on the button here to keep if you're wearing gloves or anything like that. Obviously, it's got a bigger digital crown there for using it with gloves, including diving as well. So if you're diving with it, easier to do that. It's got an added button right here that the Series 8 doesn't have. This is called the action button that allows you to go ahead and essentially just tap this button and have it do certain things. In this case, got it configured to start a workout. Yeah, it's a thick watch, but it's ultimately adding a ton of battery life. Right? It's significant battery life.
Yeah, so it has essentially a 50% increase on battery life, and there are extra low power modes, which are generally somewhat confusing in terms of what features turn on, what features turn off, and there's a global low power mode as well as a workout only low power mode. But this was obviously, Apple hearing that everyone wants longer battery life out of an Apple Watch. That's very much true here. But my hot take on this is that they really went so outdoor focused with that. And well, the thing is every Apple Watch owner wants longer battery life. And I think Apple even knows that because they come out with the low power modes for the other Apple Watches. So with something like this, I think that in my mind, a little bit of a missed opportunity where they may have gone so outdoor focused with this thing that they may have not necessarily, thought about the rest of their audience as much. From the hardware perspective, they definitely thought of them from a software perspective, which is awesome. But from a hardware perspective, people still want full fidelity recording and all that kind of stuff, and still be able to have their watch last maybe a day and a half or 2 days.
Yeah, and I think we also see with the action button as well. It's something that everyone wants the buttons, and I think the manufacturers are hearing that loud and clear. Having buttons makes sense for a watch and sports watch especially. I'm just not convinced that they've thought through how to use this button yet. The number of times that I'm accidentally starting a workout like that because my brush against this button right there is super frustrating. It's just, I don't, and even I went for a 80K, 70K hike, whatever it was, one day, one shot with this, try to get all the way to the end with battery life. And I got to the end, it was still a tiny bit of battery left. But there's just a lot of features when you got high in the mountains and trying to use gloves that it became impossible to use this watch for a lot of those features because just didn't work that well in that scenario. And so they've got the buttons, but they're just not using the buttons properly yet. And that's going to take time for Apple to hear that feedback. And I think they're hearing it from a lot of people now and make those minor tweaks. But again, the hardware is there. I mean, with 3 buttons, they can pull off anything. And I guess 3.5 because one's, the crown.
Sure.
But we'll get there.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think one of my favorite features of the action button is that you can actually use them in combination with the digital crown or the side button to actually pause a workout, which before you could do that with 2 buttons over here, but kind of awkward to, put your 2 fingers like that, where it's just kind of easier to just squeeze the watch, which is a lot better. So the other thing that it brought with the Ultra was new navigation features as well, but this was actually something that was available with other devices too. So the compass as well as the backtrack feature. So tell me how the backtrack feature kind of worked out for you.
Not very well. I was at the peak in the Chamonix Mont Blanc area. So in the Alps, in the middle of nowhere with nightfall, went to activate backtrack and it failed. This was a point where if I was legitimately lost, I would have been hosed. I was in a bad spot otherwise. And ultimately they found some bugs around that, but I think that's a good example of not necessarily testing it in the right scenario. And they figured out what caused that, not just being an ultra long track, but that's sort of the point of this watch. So that wasn't great. I think it's a very confusing feature across the board. Even just me looking at it, I'm like, doesn't really help me get back to where I wanted to be. So again, areas where Apple's thrown down a ton of impressive sport features this year. Some of them are going to stick really well, like the running power or structured workouts, etc. And some of them, I think they just need to go back to the drawing board a little bit on and figure out how they work. One thing that we didn't necessarily talk about, but it's kind of implied by the band that's on there, is the depth gauge on there. So the ability now to use this as a dive watch. And it's something that Apple has their own depth app. And if you open up the depth app, it's a very, very basic app. It just shows you the depth of the water, so not super useful. But coming at some point later on this year, there'll be the Oceanic Plus app. And that app is like the full featured dive functionality that you would expect from a dive watch. And that costs money. It's like $5 a day or something like that. I don't know exactly, but it'll vary depending on that. Or you can pay for on an annual basis for some set amount. So that's all stuff that, again, having diving in here, it seems so niche, right? The idea that Apple will be like, we're going to do running power and diving. You're like, what? You just picked the most niche things out of everything here. And they've landed there. And that's going to cause extreme pressure on Garmin to add things like diving into all their, high-end, at least like Fenix 8 or whatever watches they want.
Well, it actually very much pushed Garmin to release wrist-based running power, I think.
It absolutely did, I think.
Absolutely.
No doubt about that.
But yeah, I mean, from a hardware perspective, impressive for sure. It was ridiculously popular. I remember seeing the pre-orders go out to a month or two out, within a couple of minutes. It was pretty crazy. So, and I see these things on everyone's wrist at this point. So impressive offering. I think it's going to be very fascinating to see what comes next year, both software as well as hardware.
Yeah.
And kind of the opposite end of the scale in terms of size here.
From beefcake to a little pixie.
Little pixie. So we have the Google Pixel Watch, the highly anticipated, long rumored Pixel Watch. Basically, their very own hardware in terms of a watch that's not somebody else's hardware. So with this thing, very interesting first attempt. It has Fitbit functionality built right in, which is kind of nice, and that's obviously makes sense considering they acquired Fitbit a few years back. From my review, I actually really like this thing as a smartwatch. I think it provides a lot of good functionality. The Wear OS 3 works really great on it. It's super fast, super snappy, but it's just kind of interesting choice to go with for hardware, and quite frankly, only one size too.
Yeah, I think I was pondering, by the way, as I was scrolling through. You may have noticed it took us 25 steps to go from the charging to here.
Okay.
But we somehow burned 274 calories in that 25 steps. But yeah, I think, I'll give Google and Fitbit credit here in that I found the GPS accuracy reasonably good. I found the heart rate accuracy very, very good. Whatever dumpster fire they were doing on the Sense and Versa, they did not port into this. And having talked to Fitbit since then, there are different teams I've learned, so that's good in a sense. But hardware-wise, yeah, it's an odd choice. It is a small watch. There's no getting around that. I know people are it's not small. No, it's a small watch. Let's be clear. It's the smallest watch on this table, I think, actually. So that clearly, by definition, means it's a small watch, and that will appeal to some people. But given, Google and with the Pixel branding tends to be more focused on the tech crowd as a starting point, I'm surprised they decided to go with something that isn't necessarily going to appeal to many people in that crowd or as many people. Still, I think, we go forward till next year. It'll be interesting to see what happens. I would assume that they're going to release probably a larger version of it, of course. I'm interested to see if they keep the band clasp functionality thing. Can you do it? One shot? Can you do it? One shot? Oh no, you've already failed. The buzzer has gone off. It's over.
I was just taking my review too. I was like, I can totally do this. Like, oh my gosh, there's something wrong with yours.
Yeah.
The band mechanism. So the band mechanism is probably one of the most challenging I've ever used in my entire life. It's non-intuitive.
Yeah.
Is what it is.
Once you know how to do it and you think about it really hard, you can get it to go correctly the first time or not. That's the problem, is that like you'll do it, and then if we do this test at the end, like in 10 or 15 minutes, I just give the watch back to Des, like, do it right now. Under 2 seconds, can you undo it? And the answer is going to be no.
The undoing, it's actually not too much of an issue. It's the putting it back on, which is like horrifying.
The other challenge with this band is that this band is designed for this watch and this watch only forever and ever and ever. So because the curvature has to remain the same, the second they make this watch bigger or change it in any way, shape, or form, which will happen, of course, in the next version, this band is no longer going to be valid. So if you go off and spend a bunch of money on these nice accessory bands, which to Google's credit, their repertoire of accessory bands to the Pixel Watch is super impressive. They threw all the bands at it in all different styles, and it's great. But you have to understand those bands are only going to be good for this watch. And at the next gen, they're all going to be dead, which isn't generally the case. Like, Apple Watch bands are good across the board. Garmin bands are good within the same series of size. Like, they have kind of 3 core sizes they use depending on the size of the watch. And I know that, obviously you could say, well, there's a bigger Pixel Watch with a different band size. That's fine, but let's be honest, a Pixel Watch V2 of the same size will undoubtedly be slightly different in size.
Oh yeah. Well, I hope they have a different mechanism personally.
Yeah,
anyways.
exactly.
I mean, the mechanism's just like, it's not good. So, but I mean, yeah, as Ray said though, it's like very decent GPS accuracy. I think respectable heart rate accuracy. I did not have the GPS acquisition problems on the Pixel Watch at all that I did have on the Sense 2. So, but no, I mean, I think it's a solid performer. Price was a little bit interesting. I think it's a little bit challenging considering what you can get for an Apple Watch for much less. But I think good first attempt. I think next year's attempts, going to be better.
Yeah, I could see them making almost like what Apple did and saying this becomes their SE, if you will.
Yeah.
So next year, this becomes their cheaper watch, like Apple used to do with the Series 3, for example, for a while. Very good first attempt. They need to really focus on, 1, fixing the band attachment, but 2, on the software side of it and kind of beefing that up. There's areas where Fitbit stuff actually has features that aren't in here yet, like lots of little tiny quirky things. That just need to be pulled in.
Kind of going back to the Fitbit thing too, is that, Fitbit had the Sense 2 and they had the Versa 4. Honestly, they should have just had like one device. They should have just like killed the Versa 4 and just had the Sense 2 and maybe dropped the price to $250. And then I would sell like hotcakes and then, obviously fix the GPS.
Yeah. Cool.
Anyways, next we have the Garmin Marq Gen 2, and this is the Athlete Edition. They have 5 different ones, if I can remember correctly. So they have the Athlete Edition, they have the Adventure Edition, the Golf Edition, Captain, and Aviator.
Yep.
I think so. Yeah. So basically it kind of represents a lot of Garmin's different segments. So this is essentially the luxury version of a Garmin Epix. So basically here's a Garmin Epix over here. Here's the Marq over there. And yeah, basically, I mean, you look at the Epix all on its own, it's a great looking watch. And then you look at the Marq, you're like, oh, wow. Okay. Yeah. They really, it's a lot. So basically it's all about the construction. So as you can see from Ray right there, it's a grade 5 titanium case. There's like a nice bezel on the outside. It's a domed sapphire lens on there as well. There's just kind of like a special quick fit band attachment on there, but honestly, it's a really, really nice watch. And it's really all about the materials and construction. And that's why it costs over double what a Garmin Epix costs.
Yeah, it's a nice watch. I've said many times, I'm not a fan of the yellow scheme, but I think the watch looks beautiful.
Yeah.
Other than that, if it was just like blue or red or anything other than
yellow. Yeah. So with the Marq Gen 2 editions, Each of the Aviator one, the Captain Edition, and the Golf Edition, those come with the more specialized software features that you'll find in their other specialty watches. So like the Garmin, the D2 Mach 1, if I get that name correctly. Yeah, so that has like these special aviation features on it that don't come on the regular Epix, but do come on the Marq Gen 2 Aviator. So, and then there's the Adventure Edition has like a special expedition mode, a couple things like that.
But another good example though, where
all of them should have had all of them.
Yeah.
Yes.
At the end of the day, I should be able to buy whatever variant of that watch I want based on the hardware looks that I like. Because there's, the 5 models, whatever it is, right? And some models might appear to some people more. I don't understand why there's any software differentiation at all. It should purely be all those units have all those software features, and you're buying based on the hardware prettiness if you want, right? Yeah. And maybe there's some thing where the aviation stuff costs more for some aviation features, but then make it a software unlock. That's where I think Garmin has to grow up more and allow people to software unlock those features. And it would seem like the Marq is a great place to start with that, and that you're paying for the materials, the design of that watch. Because then I could actually see how people that don't like me, I don't necessarily love the style of the coloring of this watch. I just can't get beyond it, but I love the style of it. But I think it's the boating one, if you will, that I do like the colors of, the blues and stuff like that. And it's oh, that's a beautiful watch. And I'd be okay, well, I can at least get all the same features I want. And I know that from a running standpoint, most of those features are on that watch.
Sure, yeah.
But I don't know.
Yeah, for everyone else. Actually, before we move to that really quick though, but we do need to actually talk about one software feature that was introduced with the Marq Gen 2. And I can actually show you this live because I'm actually testing it right now. Literally, I'm mid-trip right now. So as you guys probably all know, I live in Colorado. I'm in Amsterdam right now. So I just arrived on the plane yesterday. So yeah, I'm truly testing this jet lag feature out real life right now. But if we scroll up a little bit, this feature, by the way, will be coming out to other watches here in a little bit, but it is being introduced on the Marq. But it's basically you enter your trip details into Garmin Connect first, and then it kind of gives you guidance along the way during your trip in terms of even before your trip too, in terms of going to bed a little bit earlier, avoiding light, different stuff like that. And I think it's actually a pretty neat feature. Right now, it's only utilizing your sleep history to give you that guidance, but kind of during your journey, it'll say, all right, it's time to probably start avoiding light. It's maybe time to try to exercise to kind of get you used to that time zone.
Yeah, I think it's generally very well done. I think it's, if you've traveled a lot, and I have traveled a lot over the years, a lot of miles, most of the stuff is pretty intuitive to me, but some of it is stuff that sounds obvious when someone else says it, but you might not realize these are tips and tricks to go ahead and help with jet lag, and to see them all on the watch and kind of give you those guidance along the way is something that is useful. And again, it's things like either avoiding light or seeking light or going for a run, certain times of day. I'm guessing it probably tells you, if we look there, to go exercise at 5 or 6 p.m. tonight is a way to avoid getting tired. So
yeah, sure. Actually, well, I already did work out. So
okay, so
that may be why it, So, but then it says right here to go to bed at around 10 p.m. and then wake up, let's see here, around 7 a.m. tomorrow. So that's about the same guidance that I got yesterday. Honestly, that one's probably a little bit off. I think there's still some work to be done probably there too, because for me, I live basically 8 hours behind you. So for me, I would have expected probably something more like a sleep until 9.
Yeah.
sort of thing, which I slept until 10.
Yes, you did. You did good.
Which was amazing. So, but I think very cool feature. I like the guidance that it gives you, little alerts and stuff like that. I think that's really cool. And I'm really interested to see where it's going to go in the future. And again, it will be coming to the Fenix 7 and Epix range, I believe, early-ish next year, something like that.
Next quarter of the update. So that'll be January, February.
Yeah, something like that. So yeah, look for that feature coming soon. Next up, we have the Amazfit Falcon. This was an interesting one to come out this year. So basically, this is kind of Amazfit's more premium-ish sports watch sort of thing. So with this, just like any premium sports watch nowadays, it has to have sapphire lens, it has to have a titanium bezel on it, and it has to have dual band, which it has all those things. And then this one also has GPX route guidance on it with just simple breadcrumb navigation. It doesn't have full-blown maps or anything like that, but pretty impressive battery life that I'm getting out of this thing so far. I think, gosh, I can't even remember the battery life. I can't remember the last time I charged this actually. So, but I don't have it always on display being on at this point. But yeah, pretty impressive battery life. The heart rate sensor is something I wouldn't use. Let's put it that way. It's not performing well even on the easiest tests at this point. So this thing also costs $500 too. My testing's not completely done on it yet. And honestly, from a feature standpoint, it's really neat on paper. Hardware-wise, it's impressive looking. I think an interesting offering for us, kind of like a more, I guess you could say, a company that's known for more budget offerings to come out with something a little bit more premium like this. But that's going to be a to be continued.
Future video.
Future video.
Cool.
Next up, we have the Suunto 9Peak Pro. Yep. And the Pro brought a faster processor. It brought a slightly better display. Again, it's really great looking, just like the Suunto 9Peak. It's environmentally friendly too, but just like before, it's a great looking watch. For me, in my review, I think I called it what makes it Pro or something along those lines. I think this is a good update to the Suunto 9Peak. In terms of the Pro naming, I don't see that necessarily.
No, I don't think so either. I think it's a good upgrade, like you said. It's a good start, especially on the UI side of it. They made some pretty big investments in movements forward on the platform side of it with their apps and started getting those pulled in. It's close. Like I feel like this is a bit of a transitory model, like a transition model for them, where it's still the same display as before. Well, I think there's some differences in the way they do the layering, whatever. But it's not a great display. It's just a hard to read display in general. Like it's easily the least awesome display on the table. And I think that need to improve that for something that's Pro. It's kind of a big, or it's not big, it's kind of a small display as well, relative to their competitors at this point in 2022 and going almost to 2023 here. I like the inclusion of running power though. That's nice to see. And again, their app platform behind the scenes, they're doing some really cool stuff there that if they had the right hardware now. So it's one of those things where their software isn't in a bad spot, but they just need a better hardware here. And I like the design. I know some people thought I didn't like the design, the exterior, the super sleek design. I actually like this design quite a bit.
Oh, it's one of my favorites. Yeah.
I just don't like this display in it.
Yeah.
To me, the display, and I know some people talk a lot about the bezel. The bezel by itself doesn't bother me. It's this display with the bezel as a package deal isn't awesome. But they're on the right track as well. The band is intriguing to me. It's like a split material band. I don't know if you see that there. GPS wasn't bad. They went with an all systems equivalency for GPS, not multi-band, which is again tricky. But again, as I said earlier, I don't really care what you use as long as it's accurate. So, and this was definitely a step up from the past.
One interesting thing I mentioned in my my review of it is that the bezel, yes, absolutely, it is absolutely there. So if we go, if we just scroll down, oh yeah, here we go. Yeah, we'll be able to see it if we can scroll down and we kind of move up just a little bit. So yeah, the bezel, absolutely there. However, what's really interesting is that I took the calipers out and I measured this up to like a 255. I measured this up with a whole bunch of other watches. And funny enough, the distance from the edge of the display to the outside of the case is actually very much the same as all these other watches on the Suunto 9Peak Pro. It's just basically this gigantic flat black surface that makes it really obvious. And with the 255 right here, so we see that the case comes in a little bit. They have like little accents right there. Oh, there you go. They have little accents that kind of just like distract your eye a little bit. And so it's just that yes, the bezel's there. They just didn't do a good job of hiding it.
Yeah, it's just to some degree. You have that same issue with like the Polar Pacer Pro versus again like COROS hides it better. If we look at, we'll talk about next, right? So
layered. Yeah,
you got these. Actually, this is a better one because it's the same size display, I believe. And so you can see they hide it with these, multi. It just looks better because it's the way it's designed. And I think that's true of a lot of these watches. Again, you look at something like I won't take that one out yet. It's going in line. But
Yeah.
the Instinct series, other watches just do a better job of hiding that bezel across the board, and it shows.
All right, that's the Suunto 9 Peak Pro. I kind of say this most years, but I really want to see like a big change out of Suunto. You know, it's like we saw the Suunto 7,
Yep.
which was great, but I don't know. It would be really cool to see them maybe extend that, as you were talking about even last night over beers.
Yeah, I think, to me, Suunto's got two options for the future. One is they can continue on this path, and they can add maps to something like this, get a better display, maybe go in the direction of AMOLED. That'd probably be tough for them, like cost-wise, to make that work at their price points they've been doing back here. Or go towards a Suunto 7 style, which is AMOLED, or I think it's AMOLED, maybe it's LCD, but either way, it's a high-end, bright, brilliant display based on a Wear OS. If I was Suunto, that's what I would do. I think they could absolutely tear up the market they already have a Wear OS watch, but it's a bit older now and not ideal from a battery life standpoint or the heart rate sensor and things like that. But they have more flexibility these days. Suunto does in the Wear OS program. It's what they could do with their own hardware and sensors. And I would love to see them take out a device in the same size as like the Epix series, AMOLED display, but based on Wear OS, and most importantly, port this entire platform onto that watch as an app, which is something that their existing Wear OS implementation doesn't have all those features, right? It's not that same level. There's not full sensor support. There's not like third-party sensor support, things like that. Take all the features of your Suunto 9 or Suunto 5 series devices, throw them on a Suunto 7, on a Wear OS platform, and compete effectively head-to-head with Apple's watches and the Garmin Epix series watches, with those high-end displays. And you're going to get the same battery life in a Wear OS watch as you would an Apple Watch. It won't quite get the same battery life as Garmin's, watches, because that's a different kind of class, if you will. But I think they could do amazing stuff there.
But I mean, if Samsung can pull off 80 hours on this, I mean, absolutely it can be done.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and it's honestly, it's kind of missing in the marketplace right now in terms of those features in a Wear OS device.
Yeah, for Android folks, basically. That's the main. I think they could really bring it back, especially again, because that whole third-party app platform that they can pull in pieces into the ecosystem is not just on the watch apps for Suunto. It's also the entire platform integration, like they're doing Connect IQ type stuff back there. I mean, it's really cool, but they've just not the right hardware for it yet.
Totally. All right, next up we have COROS, the Apex 2 and the Apex 2 Pro, and these updated the long-standing original Apex and Apex Pro, which were pretty good watches, good values and everything like that. So these came with the sapphire lenses, titanium cases, all that good stuff. The Apex 2 Pro, this brought dual band GPS technology to this guy right here. Other than that, I mean, these were just, I think, again, good updates. I mean, the thing is like COROS, they actually brought a lot of the updates via software before in terms of like the map support and whatnot. So these were a little bit basically more hardware refreshes, which again, like COROS does a really good job at very consistent and pretty significant software updates over time for older devices. Yep,
definitely. It's definitely more of this side here was like the hardware update to pair with the software pieces that came in. I think, this was a good step. I think the pricing wasn't quite nailed on these relative to the competitors. It's just they were a little bit high, again, compared to both Polar as well as Garmin, but especially Garmin in this case, having offerings like the 255 and Instinct 2 at lower price points, especially now being on sale for the holidays as well, like dramatically lower price points, is tough. I think, I like the bands on there. The bands are like that style being the default band. It's kind of a nice touch. It'll be interesting to see where they go with this. Like what features they may add over time. They've teased having, there is music support in these. They've teased having some sort of music provider that they believe they can get on board. That's a really tough nugget to crack. The music industry, those wall gardens are massive right now. The walls on the gardens are massive. And so I'm skeptical that they will be able to pull that off. If they can, that'd be awesome. I would love for that to happen, but that's a tough nugget to crack.
Yeah, I think something that was introduced with this, as well as even I can't remember if it actually came out with the Pod 2 in conjunction with it, but basically they still do have wrist-based running power. They're not going to further develop it, I believe was the quote. However, they have changed their grade adjusted pace or adjusted pace naming, I guess you could say, on their, which is basically grade adjusted pace. Yeah. So to effort pace.
Yeah.
And this is in an effort to make it more easy to understand name for people, I guess.
They provided very little information about what that is at this point, and it's really tough because, as you said, they took gap, so grade adjusted base pace is something that allows you to normalize your pace over different terrain. So the idea that you can, figure out what is this pace on a 7% equal on flat ground, and vice versa.
Yeah.
So totally useless for me here in the Netherlands, where it's pancake flat in Amsterdam, but super useful if you're doing trail running or anything like that, where you want to go ahead and try to compare those paces across the board. So that's called GAP. It's been around for many, many years by initially Training Peaks, I believe, and then to other entities from there. Garmin just recently added it as well. So COROS has had it for a while as adjusted pace, not as GAP, so slightly different, but the exact same functionality behind the scenes. And then now they're rebranding this whole thing as effort pace, and right now they're exactly the same. So while it's technically the same underneath the covers, now in the future they're going to add more
environmental, I believe. So what those would be?
But they don't ever define that. So to me, it's very marketing-esque right now, but without any definition on it. I just don't see a reason to get rid of GAP. GAP is super useful, and I don't want other things thrown into that bucket right now. I want GAP to be there as it is.
Yeah.
And if you want to do something different for effort pace and whatever, that's fine. They had hoped that other companies would get on board effort pace. That is super naive because it's not industry standard. No platforms are supporting it. No Training Peaks, no Stravas, no whatever. So I wish they would focus on running power at this point, and furthering that and leave GAP there. And I'm not saying running power is perfect. I'm probably one of the most critical people of running power out there. But this has been a banner year for running power, right?
Yeah.
We had everyone, right?
Everyone has it.
Apple has it natively. Suunto added it natively. Garmin added it natively to wrist-based. Polar and of course COROS have had it natively for a long while.
Whether we use it or not, we have different use cases too. But at the same time, there are absolutely consumers out there who want running power. They want grade adjusted pace. To introduce effort pace, I don't know. I feel like it's confusing the situation.
And it may seem like a tangent, but hey, if you're now an hour and 32 minutes into this video, then you're already way into the whole tangent game. So
nice hardware updates from COROS there.
Cool.
So next up, we have the Polar Ignite 3, and again, from my perspective, I thought this was a pretty substantial update out of Polar. So can you?
What is happening there with that rainbow?
I think the rainbow has to do something with rain. See,
but there's a thunderstorm too.
Yeah, well, look at the bright side, Ray. There's rainbows.
I have not used this watch face. This is your watch, not mine.
It is. Oh, that's right, huh? All right. Anyways, Polar Ignite 3, much larger.
What is that? That's the worst day ever. It's going to start off thunderstorms and end with a rainstorm.
Anyways, the Polar Ignite 3, this updated the Polar Ignite 2 quite a bit with a much higher resolution AMOLED display. It got rid of the bezel quite a bit, got rid of the flat tire. And that display, honestly, it's gorgeous. It really, really looks good. There are some challenges with it though. What's that?
That's the challenge.
That's the challenge. So basically there are some challenges with it, such as they did say that I believe that it has a faster processor. I'm not sure it necessarily can keep up with maybe that higher resolution display. It's just, it's a bit laggy, in spots. And that was just kind of disappointing from that experience. But, it still has all of Polar's like FitSpark and their really good sleep tracking and all that kind of good stuff. But they put it in a really, really nice case too. Yeah, super, super thin. In general, pretty impressed with this update, but there were just some things holding it back.
Yeah, I think this is a really cool looking watch. This is a beautiful display for Polar, by far the best I've ever had. Super thin, which is great. Super lightweight, which is great. Absolutely horrendous band.
Oh my God. There was a special department that
collectively, not just us, but all of our significant others that have tried this band had unpublishable words about it. It is really, really bad. I don't understand how this band ever made it out.
It's kind of like this weird rubbery,
you go through like this and then you go under like this. But when you do this under moment on your wrist, it pulls your arm hairs out and back and then pulls them back through again. Oh, it's miserable.
Yeah.
Where else do we go from there? There's rainbows though. So hey,
there's rainbows. Exactly. You got to look at them.
This watch has a lot of potential. So if they, one, can change a band, but two, if they can fix the lagginess that myself, yourself, and others have seen, and then if they can fix, I had problems with, not the heart rate accuracy was great. Heart accuracy was spot on for me, the best polar watch I've had in years, but the GPS accuracy, I've had a lot of troubles with it, and so if they can address that, that'd be great. But this is it's a good step for polar. Just needs some tweaks.
Yeah. The GPS accuracy was okay-ish for me. It wasn't stellar at all. Heart rate was very good. Yeah. But no, I mean, I think that it shows that polar is really looking the right direction, I guess you could say, where they're overcoming some of their probably the biggest complaints, such as really display.
Yeah.
So next up, this was wow. I mean, this was the biggest out of left field thing that I saw this entire year, and it came super, super late in the year, but this is the new Instinct crossover, and this one is an Instinct 2 with analog hands.
Yeah, so like if we just pick something here that actually has data, waxing class.
What?
This is your watch, not mine. Oh, waxing crescent. Okay. It's yours, so
That's actually yours.
What?
The blue one's mine.
What is waxing crescent?
Huh? I don't know.
Oh, it's the moon phases.
Yeah, totally.
I was like, but you can see the arms swing around right there. But they do this on different things. So like I'm trying to find what's another steps. Here we go. So there's no steps right now. Oops, not steps. So steps will now show me my gauge for the day. Now it's down at the bottom here. This will work its way all the way to the other side there. But it's used on lots of cool things. The compass, for example, is another one.
Heart rate gauge during workouts, actually. Yep. Yeah, that's pretty cool.
That's super cool. So there we go. Oops, that's compass. This is barometric oximeter, but it'll work the same way. So you can see it's used now. It goes straight up and down. It's clever. It's, again, we looked earlier on the Vivomove Sport, having that same sort of, tap, tap. Tap, tap. There we go. Good job. And that same style now is leveraged here, but they've just upped the ante. Most notably, though, no more little window up there.
There is no more little window. Yeah, there's no more little window, and the analog hands, they absolutely do obstruct the display a little bit, but Garmin's own marketing for it, I think they were aiming the right direction, but I'm not sure they emphasized enough that this really is an Instinct premium. I think the Instinct 2 is a nice watch. It is. It's a good watch, but this one, the construction on it, it's really nice. I mean, it's a little bit weightier, so it feels a little bit more solid. There's stainless steel underneath there. And the price did increase, by the way, quite a bit too. It's $500 versus, I believe, $400 or so for the equivalent model. So it's a much more premium Instinct.
It's a nice watch. I also like the glass. I don't know if you can see it on edge here. The glass is basically a little bit flatter across. There's not that big inset like there is on this one here. On this one, you've also got the fabric ripper down there.
Yeah.
So the inside of the Instinct 2, those little dots that you see right there, they catch fabric like on the inside of your sweater, and they just pull the strands out. And that doesn't anything like ruin your shirt. It just leaves fabric there, and it's always there. And so this is much cleaner. It's like you said, it's like a premium.
When I first got the images of it, I was like, that's pretty cool concept. Then I started looking at the images more. I'm like, I'm not sure if I'm into that. And then I got it in person. I'm like, oh my gosh, like this thing is really impressive. So,
nice.
So I know the price is quite a bit more than an Instinct 2, but I think definitely it's a lot more premium Instinct at the same time. So
no, I like it.
Yeah. So last up, we have the Bounce. Bounce away.
So this is the Garmin's Kids LTE activity tracker. So it's $150, plus you pay basically like a set amount subscription per month for the LTE side, $10 a month by itself, or you can buy $100 for the year. Now, it's not an AMOLED display, it's an LCD display, but it looks virtually the same, and gets 2 days of battery life, so a bit slim in the battery life. But the idea is that your child can go and wear this, and they get their steps just like any other Vivo Fit Junior activity trackers that Garmin has. But they can also go ahead and track GPS runs with it, for example, in here. There's some games on there you can do. You can do the puzzle slider. This is really hard, by the way. I've tried doing this a few times. I can't do this. Let's see if I show it to you there. There's some games on here. You can slide these pieces around. This is not my specialty, if you will. The display is nice, but I think it's a bit overkill for this watch because, again, you're down to that 2 days of battery life. It's not always on display, so each time, a couple seconds will go off again, you got to raise your wrist to show up. It does have a speaker and mic on it, though, so you can send messages back and forth. So I can go into the messages here. There we go, communications, contacts, and the kid can go ahead and send to me, dad, her sister, or mom, and then from there, you can listen to messages back and forth. So the idea being that you don't have to actually be able to text. So my kids can't type and text. They can go ahead and just send messages back and forth. They're young enough to do that. And they've had a lot of fun doing that. Overall, it works reasonably well. I've had a couple of issues with the LTE side of it. So you can check in here and get help. You can set up boundaries. So I can set up a boundary around the school geofence, if you will, around home, around the office, around like after school care. And when you pop in and out of those boundaries, I, as a parent, get an alert automatically. So our LTE trackers are nothing new, but this is kind of a beast. And I know a lot of them are really big. All of them are really big. But just for context here on how big this is the Apple Watch Ultra. And this is, these are giant, right?
Oh
It's basically about the same thickness and about the same. This has a little more bump on the bottom. There is no optical sensor here, which is interesting. I don't disagree with that per se, but it's interesting to note.
But there's an important thing about that messaging, though, too, is that it's not traditional messaging.
No.
Yeah. So this is the message. All the LTE functionality in terms of the voice and the messages going back and forth. Those are going to be contained within a Garmin app, right?
Right. Yep. So I don't know if I can. So, your kids can go back and forth with this. It's all via their platform. And see if they can send like 20-second messages each. And you just pay that one fee to them. And, some people argue, like if you were to go buy an Apple Watch SE, which is what some people do if they have teenagers, for example, then they can put them on the plan for $5 a month versus this is a bit more expensive at basically $10 a month or a little under that, $8 a month if you're on a yearly plan. But this has a very high just works factor, right? It all just kind of works within the ecosystem. And for kids that are essentially, under 10-ish, their Garmin says 6 and up is their age, and I'd say that roughly works. Maybe some features, are better suited for older kids. Having GPS on there is cool. It feeds in, they can see it on the little app afterwards, see their GPS track, see where they ran. It's cool.
Nice.
But back to our very beginning point, though, this is layering those blocks.
Oh, yeah.
So if you look,
you have the Venu 2 Plus, you've got so many things that these are puzzle pieces that are going to
definitely puzzle pieces.
Going to come together.
Like they had the 945 LTE, a year and a half ago or so. That was a puzzle piece, right? And that had connectivity for a sport emergency and safety standpoint. So, you couldn't send voice messages to someone, and there was no geofence boundaries and all that kind of stuff. Now these are here, but not there. This has a speaker and the mic. This does too. Layer one step at a time. And I just wait for that moment where there's all these pieces are together. And because, geofencing is potentially useful in some areas where you want to track if someone's gone in or out, or the idea to do voice messages would be super helpful on a Fenix series watch that you don't want to sit there in the cold with gloves trying to type something. To be able to send to my wife, hey, I'm running late on the run. And literally that, what was 3 seconds of words there? To be able to just hold that down and go, boom, running late my run, and it sends it off and she listens to it. That'd be perfect for a sport watch.
Oh yeah, totally. That brings us to talking about what we're gonna possibly see next year.
Buttons. I think we'll see a couple things. One, I have no idea if we'll see less watches next year. This was obviously essentially a bit of a COVID backlog, I think,
yeah, totally.
of companies that even if they're operationally up and running really good into 2021, availability and components and stuff weren't necessarily there. Everyone boom, released in 2022. Next year we could see the opposite of that a little bit, with there's so many releases this year, also recession fears and things like that, driving less watches next year. But I think ultimately from a tech side, I think we'll see more buttons on some of the newer players. So the Apples, the Samsungs, the Googles of the world, Fitbits of the world. And I think we'll see more of probably the LTE integration from the Garmins of the world, I guess, if you will.
Totally. Yeah. I think we're probably gonna see we saw a lot of AMOLED this year, but I think
Yeah.
we're going to see even more AMOLED next year.
Yep.
And I think that dual band's probably going to be almost a de facto next year, considering devices that are coming in very inexpensive are coming with dual band at this point too. So again, it's not necessarily about having the technology, it's about how you implement it, the intended design, so on and so forth too.
Yeah, I would give some very strong side eye to any company that releases a $300 plus watch next year without multiband.
Oh yeah.
And the only way you can get out of that side eye realm is if your GPS is just so damn good it doesn't matter. Right? That's, otherwise, yeah, if you walk up to the bar in January with a non-multi-band $300 plus watch, you'd be like, really?
Yeah. No, and I think from the more of, I mean, I know we call this the Sportswatch Year in review, but more from the smartwatch end of things, I think that's going to be a really interesting year there too, because, you know, we did see some good offerings from, some significant offerings, I guess you could say, from Samsung, Apple, as well as Google out there. And I think there's going to be, from all of those three different manufacturers, I think there's a lot of lessons to be learned from what came out this year, and a lot of opportunities to improve on that next year.
Yeah, I think Apple's clearly the one to watch next year in terms of sport features. You know, they kicked off the ball this summer with WatchOS 9, and they talked about features they want to release by the end of the year. Just in beta in the last week or so, we saw the Race Pace or whatever it's called feature, as well as the track feature out. And so that is one of a number of features they outlined for the end of 2022. And I think they know that, you know, they have a lot of catching up to do from a sports feature standpoint. And it'll be really fascinating to see, can they keep this cadence up through the winter, through the spring, through the summer, or will they kind of go quiet again until like a WatchOS 10? I think that would be a mistake if they went quiet, because Garmin's not going quiet. Garmin's got quarter release cycles, and they're doing that. And the same is true of COROS, and the same is true of Suunto as well. Like no one's really keeping quiet. And I think that's also, it'll be interesting to see what Google does with the Pixel Watch.
Oh, yeah.
You know, they had some minor things they've talked about fixing before the end of the year, but it's more like fixes than it was feature rollouts. And will we see them start to double down in that area, in the sport area or the feature area, or they go quiet? And I think if they can start like throwing out quarter release cycles, that'll be a really interesting sign for next year.
Yeah, awesome. Very cool. So yeah, that's the 2022 Sportswatch Year in Review. If you have any questions about any of these watches that we didn't cover in this video or we didn't cover in our reviews, just go ahead and drop those in the comments section down below. And if you found the information in this video to be useful, you know what to do. Hit that like button as well. Subscribe to his channel. Check out his website. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't done so already. And Ray, any parting words for?
No, thanks for coming over again and bringing your watch collection through the TSA security checkpoints.
Yeah, exactly. I was going to say, like, I actually didn't get stopped at security this time around, so I clearly did not bring enough watches with me, which that's kind of a joke that we, if we go on a trip together, if we don't get stopped at security, we didn't bring enough devices with us.
No, I've had some very, very angry moments of security this year with watches and phones.
Yeah. Well,
but, no, thanks for making the trip.
Thank you for having me again. Yeah. And we will see you next year for the 2023 Sportswatch Year in Review.
Fifth, right?
Huh?
The fifth one.
Numero 5.
Fifth annual.
Exactly.
Cool.
All right. Thanks so much for watching. Thanks, Ray.
Yep. Have a good one.
All right. Take care. Okay. Well, we're going to have a couple watches that are just going to bounce around a little bit.
Yeah.
I mean, this one, that one's precarious. That one I didn't even try.
Waxing class.
What?
This is your watch, not mine. See, that'll bokeh.
Can you?
What is happening there with that rainbow? Awkward. I'm just in a weird spot. I'm not sure how to. I'm too tall for this.
Oh my God.